All right, welcome to the final session. Super excited to lead this. I know Hilary's camera is not working, but hopefully she will join us here in a second. So welcome, my name is Stef Strack. I'm the founder of Voice in Sport and Biz. We are a new sports company focused on bringing visibility to amazing women like these that we have here with us today and elevating their voices. And today we are going to actually, is someone else joining? Okay. So today we are going to use the framework of the 9 Viz global goals for girls and women in sport to have a conversation about some of the systemic issues that we are facing and that we can all be part of the change. So I'm excited to be joined here today by some incredible athletes from the industry, and I'll start with introductions. So Lia Neal first, 2-time Olympic swimmer, Viz League mentor at Voice in Sport, and the founder of Swimmers for Change, which is an incredible platform we will be talking about today. Andi Sullivan, U.S. women's national soccer player and pro soccer player at the Washington Spirit. Elizabeth Williams, WNBA player for the Atlanta Dream, the secretary for the WNBA Players Association, and a Viz League mentor and advocate. And lastly, Hilary, thanks for joining us, one of the founding members of the PWHPA and U.S.A. team hockey. And so I'll kick things off with us today with some of the current challenges that girls face in sport and how we are addressing them through our advocacy efforts all together. So first, you guys know this, but girls are dropping out of sport at 2 times the rate of boys at age 14. And in high school, when they make it there, there's less than 1.13 million opportunities for girls versus boys. And in college, when they get to college level, while Title IX has been an incredible law that has helped driven advancements for women in sport, there's an overall lack of enforcement, lack of education, and lack of reporting. So we're going to tackle some of those issues today. And while there's a lot of momentum in women's sports, there's still a lack of coverage, around 3.2%. You guys just heard from the FAM Project. We're trying to supercharge that at Voice in Sport. And there's a lot of conversations right now around transgender athletes and how that's threatening girls and women in sport. But the real issues that girls and women in sport are facing are the lack of investment, lack of visibility, lack of opportunity, and general lack of support. So let's get our conversation started today. It's all about taking action and lighting a fire in all of us because we all have a role to play in moving women's sports forward. So we'll start with you, Lia. We're going to start with the first goal of equal access. And this is about equal access to sport regardless of your identity, your sexual orientation, your economic status, or your race. And we know girls are falling out of sport at 2 times the rate of boys. And for urban girls of color, that's twice that of white suburban girls. And you're in a sport of swimming that's not known to be the most diverse sport at the elite level. And since 2000, only 5 Black or mixed race swimmers have actually qualified to represent the U.S. in the Olympics. So we have a lot of work to do in your sport. So I want to start with your role as a Viz League mentor. What are you doing to drive change for the larger systemic issue of girls falling out of sport?
Thank you for giving me the first question, Steph. And I think obviously all of these talking points are very important. I'm so glad we're addressing it. And I'm also just grateful that Viz and you started Viz and that Viz exists because it allows for a bridging of communication between female athletes who've already been through it and learned through trial and error with current female athletes currently going through it and trying to figure things out. So my role, after doing my entire career and getting to the position I'm in now, is to just help others learn in a more accelerated way of things to do, not to do, from just lessons that I've learned over the years and the experiences that I've gathered. And yeah, just basically wrapping it up in a bow and just giving it to them in an abridged version so that they can bypass all of the process of trial and error so that they can progress that much more quickly.
And Lia, why do you think visibility to role models matters so much at that critical age of 13 and 14 years old?
Yeah, of course, it's super important because I didn't realize it back then. Like you just talked about the statistics of just how non-diverse swimming is and how there have only been like 5 like black like swimmers on the national team and like the history of the US national team, which is like just crazy numbers like that. And I didn't realize it when I was younger, just how that like subconsciously affects you. But growing up and then like making my first Olympic team in 2012, I started getting that question a lot more of like, what does it mean to you to be like the first like African American woman to swim in an Olympic final, the first to make multiple Olympics like in 2016, and it really made me realize just how important representation is, because it's everything is very subliminal and like very subconscious. Once you see someone who looks like you doing something, that just makes it so much more achievable like for yourself. So even though I didn't notice it because I just didn't know what I didn't know back then, now like being on the other side of it, I totally understand just how important representation is.
Amazing. Well, you guys are doing some incredible things on that platform, so we're thankful for you and what you do. I'd like to talk about goal number 2, which is about equal opportunity. And this really falls in a little bit to Title IX. So Andi, I want to start with you because you are very passionate about equal access and recognize that it's not equal for everyone in the US, especially at the youth sports level when you then go on to the elite club opportunities that are very expensive. So you've grown up in Washington, D.C., you now play for the Washington Spirit. So you're in the center of the political landscape. And you are actually part of the team that signed the Viz pledge for the first time for the NWSL. So thank you for supporting the pledge. And that pledge actually helps get us to train girls on Title IX enforcement and education. And then they can report their issues with our community every week. So thank you for doing that. So why is fighting for equal opportunity for girls and women in sport in those early years in high school and college so important for the industry to pay attention to?
Yeah, I think it's so important because what Lia just said, not only is it subconscious, but it's also cyclical. So, women are dropping out of sport because they don't see it, and we need to bridge that gap. And the Spirit is super excited about the Viz Pledge. We have this alliance program that partners with a lot of clubs in the area, and we get to bring in, players from all over to play together. And I think being able to incorporate this pledge into that to educate them so they can advocate for themselves currently and in the future, and not just for themselves, but other people in similar situations is going to be huge, because not only is it that just about sport, I think that's about women in workforces everywhere, and learning how to incorporate that information, look around, like Lia was just saying, like she didn't even realize how important what she was doing was, because she was just living it. And then until people asked her about it, that's when she realized how important it was. So I think we all kind of notice when we're living in the women's sports world, like we notice these things and we feel them, but we haven't had the practice at bringing in the data and all those statistics and using that to explain our case as much as athletes. And so by doing that and teaching people those skills, it could actually lead to more change. So I think it's super important in sports and in whatever careers may follow.
Yeah, it's pretty frightening. I think one of the recent statistics that I looked at was like 83% of college coaches said they'd never received formal Title IX training. And that's when I was like, wait, what? What are we going to do then to change that system? And if the adults are not getting trained, then how do we power up the athletes that are being most affected by the lack of enforcement and really charge them with the tools to drive change? So we're so thankful for the Washington Spirit signing the pledge and for you being there on the ground in Washington, D.C. Let's talk a little bit, I guess, about number 3. So goal number 3 is more visibility. It's why we called our company Viz, more Viz. We want to give more visibility to all of you amazing athletes, but this is not just about media coverage. It's about leagues. It's about diverse leadership to inspire the next generation of athletes. But Hilary, I want to start with you just on media. I love the fan project, and we're part of that amazing project. Okay. We really believe that we should have more visibility for female athletes. So This is an interesting question. I'd love everybody to chime in after Hilary starts this, but how should the media think about coverage of women's pro sports? Would it be better from a visibility standpoint if media entities had separate channels for women, or the same channel but equal coverage?
Yeah, this is a tough question. I think it's a combination of both, right? I think the female-centric platforms or the women's sports platforms are instrumental in storytelling, and a lot of the times we don't get a platform to be able to really understand or witness and kind of see the process of a player behind the scenes. So that's important. But then also too, on these mainstream platforms, to have equal representation across sport is huge. So, you know, I think we saw a lot of amazing coverage this summer, and it just so happened that the guys weren't playing, and it forced a lot of different outlets to put the women on, and that was great. So the silver lining in a global pandemic is now women's sports. You can see the proof is there that if people know how to watch it, if there's a consistent schedule, the viewers don't have to go out of their way to try and consume this amazing game or league or whatever you want to call it, or match. So it's just making it simple for people to be able to turn on their TV, log into a stream, tweet, Instagram, TikTok, whatever it is, to be able to access the talented female athletes that are out there.
I love that. Visibility is important. Breaking down the barriers. Don't make it so difficult to find women's sports. I think that's so key. Andi, Lia, Elizabeth, do you want to jump in on that? Do you have an opinion? Should it be better to have us covered on women's specific channels, or on the same channel but just equal coverage?
I think there's value in having us on the same channel with equal coverage. I think, again, the easier it is to consume, the better. I think the channels specific to women are for the fans that kind of already exist, but as you're trying to grow and find new fans, I think once you put us on a platform where anyone can watch, that's how you get the new fans. So I do think there's a balance there, but there is a lot of value in increasing our visibility on these mainstream channels.
I was actually talking to a friend yesterday who, knows about the league, knows about my team, and he was like, yeah, I was trying to look up, when your games actually were, and I couldn't find it. It was so hard. And so I don't really have a preference, but I do see, what Elizabeth's saying is, if you want to grow, being able to be on, the same channels, the same coverage, but also just making it easy for your fans that already exist, and having that consistency would just make things so much simpler.
Amazing. Well, we have a schedule on the Viz platform of all of your guys' games, all of your games. So if you're wondering, you can go to our platform, you can check out the schedule, because it's so important. But even just finding those is sometimes hard for people on my team. So we've got to do a better job as an industry. So that brings me, I guess, to the next one, which is around health and wellness. So goal number 8 is about health and wellness. And Elizabeth, I want to hand this one over to you, because you guys recently just went through a new deal, the Cba Negotiations, and it's so important. And it's your role as the secretary of the WNBAPA. You were part of that team that led the work behind the new Cba, and it drove significant progress. And I know it's not 100% to the level of where you guys want it to be, but you have a really big passion in that health and wellness space. And for those of you that don't know, she's a former Duke athlete, and she studied psychology in college. She also hosts these e-talks with docs around health and wellness today. So she's heavily involved in this space. And I want to turn it over to you and just ask, what have you learned from the negotiations with the WNBA and the conversations that you host in this space about health and wellness that the industry should consider when providing the best resources for women in sport?
Man, I mean, those negotiations, I learned a lot. I think, well, firstly, one of the biggest things was just the power of communication and communicating effectively, because I think because our CBA negotiations went so well, that's why negotiating for what the bubble season was going to look like, even from not only a health and wellness standpoint, but a social justice standpoint, was so effective, because we were able to, fight for what we wanted and show that we were going to be fully invested as players. And so they were going to put that return in for us as a league. But I mean, specifically in regards to health and wellness, one of our biggest things was, as a league full of women, we wanted to make sure that players that were out due to pregnancy would get 100% of their pay. We wanted to continue to increase benefits for, fertility, for, egg freezing, players even having the ability to do that was something that was really important because, again, a league full of women, we wanted to make sure that our CBA reflected that.
I love it. Like, what do you think companies, other sports brands can take from the negotiation deals that you made around protecting women when they're pregnant and when they're having their babies? What is something specifically around that others can learn?
I think ultimately showing that you value your employee or your employer as a person, valuing that it's not just about the fact that we're on the court and we're playing, like we're also mothers, we're also worried about making sure that our kids are in the best places, in the best situations. So I think valuing people as a whole, I think that is something that corporations and companies can take, because the more comfortable we feel and the happier that we are, then you're going to get a greater product and a greater investment from us.
Love it. Well, while you guys were behind the scenes doing the negotiations on the new CBA, the U.S. Women's National Team was a bit more public about their fight for equal pay. And so I want to talk a little bit about that with Andi, because it's global goal number 4, equal pay. And this is really about ensuring equitable compensation on wages, but not just for professional athletes, but also amateur athletes. So we know the U.S. Women's National Team has been fighting. They've been suing U.S. Soccer, asking for equitable compensation. In May of 2020, the judge ruled that the U.S. Women's National Team could not prove that U.S. Soccer financially discriminated against them due to their gender. But last month, U.S. Soccer and U.S. Women's National Team actually came to a settlement over their working conditions, which include flights, venue selection, supporting staff, etc. That then paved the way forward for an appeal over equal pay to move us all forward. So, Andi, a question from you. What can the sports industry learn from the fight for equal pay that the U.S. Women's National Team has been leading? And if you can share with us a moment that brought the players together to take action, what did you learn from that experience about driving change?
I think the sport industry can learn from all our experiences just to listen to your athletes. And I think really take a second to understand where people are coming from. This is, I think, more than just across the sports industry, but in life, I think our first reaction is to react instead of to listen and really try to see things from another person's perspective. And I think that kind of was the reaction, is like, when players are speaking out, we need to stifle it. And it's like, no, like, let's listen, let's communicate, let's be proactive and collaborate rather than trying to shut things down. Because, we're famous for our lawsuit, but that's not the first thing that we did. We did try to approach things differently. And I think I would also say that the sport industry, like, athletes are very thoughtful, and we're not going to speak out rashly. Like, we understand the consequences of us speaking out. So we're not speaking out just for ourselves, but usually for change across a whole system. And I think that that's something that people don't often understand, is that if, we're facing this trouble, like, how many other people are facing this trouble, and we're bringing light to an issue as well. So a moment that really stood out to me was in March of 2020, when we were in our last She Believes Cup game, and there were some comments from U.S. Soccer that were shown to the public, pretty much, saying that their strategy was to argue that we were inferior because we were women, pretty much. And before the game, we, turned out our warm-up jerseys, and they eliminated the sponsor, and it just had an outline of the crest with 4 stars, and it was so powerful. And that's what I would say is also, if sports industry isn't interested in collaborating, athletes are resilient and they're creative, and they'll find a way. And so if you don't collaborate, like, things are going to get difficult. And that was a super powerful moment for us in the fight for equal pay.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Stef, I had to jump in there. I said to Michelle Roberts yesterday, one of my favorite Langston Hughes poems, what happens to a dream deferred? Does it fester like a sore, or does it explode? And I think on the athlete perspective, I think they're ready for an explosion. You're ready for something to change now. But I get the feeling that it's more festering like a sore. But while we may not come to any solutions today, I think everybody on this panel will agree that the more we amplify, the more of these conversations that are had, maybe an eye or a brain or a heart is open and the pace of change is accelerated. So thank you all for joining us. We really do appreciate it. That's the end of our conference, though. 2 days of women in sports. We've had some fantastic panels, panelists, really great exchange of ideas. Really want to thank our sponsors, Goldman Sachs and Facebook, for helping it make it happen. And please stick with us for our next Sportico Live event scheduled for June 9th. We will tackle diversity and inclusion in sports. Thanks again.